Alright, welcome to another update video with the Mark I Rabbit. So we are here and I'm showing you guys my progress on the rust conversion here on the roof. Sorry it's a little late, but it might help seeing it a little better. So there's still like this kind of film that gets stuck on there, and you can see it's kind of loose. It does come off. You can see close here that this is what the rust spots look like. Now I was able to dissolve the rust out, and I was not using any sort of something that you buy off the shelf. Well, it is something you buy off the shelf, but it's not for rust removal, and I'll show you guys how to use that right now. But you could see where these big splotches were, and I took it down to bare metal with those Scotch-Brite pads that you put on a grinder, and I got some from Harbor Freight. They're called Warrior pads, and I have some down there. And basically, they are like a abrasive material, and they're like they're a fiber, right? They're fiber pads, and they're coated inside of they're coated with some sort of chemical, right? Coated with some sort of hard chemical, and then you use that and it just eats through paint, but it doesn't destroy the metal. So that is the key, is that you don't want to use like a wire wheel or anything like that, because it'll just eat the metal up. So this is the best way of doing it, is to go around, and that will take away a lot of the rust. But if you leave it there too long on a certain spot of the metal, it'll start tearing the metal up, and it'll start heating the metal up. And eventually, if you stay there too long, you will turn the metal red hot, and it'll start to melt your pad, and then eventually you will destroy that pad, and eventually you'll warp out the steel itself. So now I have to do some sort of now I have to do some sort of two-part. I'm going to use my 5-star Extreme on top of this, and then that will be, I'll call that good, and that will seal in this, so it doesn't have any sort of other rust issues ever again. I'm not going to put any sort of Por 15 or anything like that on there, because I've removed all the rust. Now this is what it should look like. You shouldn't see any more black marks. Some of these, they do have a little bit more black marks, and what happens is when you use this chemical, it will do that. So it'll turn the rust brown to black, and you shouldn't see any more black. It should be gray, and the only thing that should be left over is the pitting from the rust. So for example, here, like here, all that you're seeing, there's no more rust there. It's just all pitting, and you can see that there's stuff that's coming off. It's got like a stuff on it, so I need to hit everything with sandpaper to get it all come off. So let's talk about what chemical I used. So this is a Clean Strip muriatic acid. Now muriatic acid is another name for hydrochloric acid, and you use hydrochloric acid it's a very low what's called a pKa value, so it's very reactive. It's like a -6. So when you put it on the steel, it will grab onto the rust, and it will react with the rust and bond with the rust, and it will eat the rust away, and eventually you'll have clean, unpitted metal. So you brush that on with a chip brush. Make sure you have some water sitting by. So you have a bucket of water, a 5-gallon bucket of water, and then you use a chip brush. And you rub it on there with the chip brush. And what you want to do is you want to just open up a small piece of the cap, and then when you're pouring it on the roof, you just pour it and put the chip brush in the way, and then have it go through the chip brush so it doesn't splash. Because the hydrochloric acid is an acid and it will react with your skin, but the muriatic acid is a 30% mix between water and acid. So it is a lower concentration, so it's quite a bit safer. So you could do that, but still use some gloves. So these are some PVC chemical resistant gloves, and always have a bucket of water standing by, and always wear glasses. So then what you could do is go ahead and brush that on, and then you'll also want a metal wire brush, hand brush, and you'll want some sandpaper also. And so what happens is you'll put it on there, you'll brush it over the entire surface, right? And make sure it sits on any sort of paint or anything like that the least amount of time, because it will start eating through the paint. And you can see it's eaten through the paint a couple times there. And it will start to eat through other stuff. So what I suggest that you do, as well as your skin. So I would use it less than about an hour and a half or less, and then in about that amount of time you can take care of as much rust as you can. And then what you'll do is, I suggest after that you take a shower and wash your body with water to get rid of any sort of acid. And then obviously if you get it in your face or your eyes, use what it says on there, where it says danger. It talks about just rinsing it out for 15 minutes with water, and that should take care of it. So after that, you have pretty much done. You should have something that looks like what I have here, with just a chip brush and a wire brush. Make sure it's a nice and rigid wire brush, and you'll be able to get it all the way down to just the pitting where there's no more rust left, and you can go from there and get ready to coat it. So you can see I just got to take off this this kind of residue that it leaves. It leaves like this residue, and you just have to get some sandpaper, and then I'm going to go over this and sand it, and then try to get it painted today. And I'm just going to paint it without masking, so I'm going to use a paintbrush with that 2-part, and I'm just going to brush it on there because I have to sand it anyways. And I want to put it on it relatively thin, so make sure I fill up all the pitting, and then I'll sand it later with some 220 or 320 or something like that. And then it will be ready to paint after that. I should be able to get enough on there that I should be able to fill up all the pitting and everything, and be able to be ready to paint after that. So that is what I have here with the panel, and that's what I suggest doing. So, and this stuff is cheap. This stuff is like $9.99 for this muriatic acid, and it comes in a gallon. This is the best stuff, I think. I tried some other stuff and it sat there for a long time, but this stuff, what you do is when you put it on there, it starts eating instantly, right? So cover the entire surface, and then get the wire brush, and then start to work it with the wire brush. And what will happen is it'll streak brown in the muriatic acid, in the hydrochloric acid, and then you know you're done when it will no longer streak brown, right? If it stops streaking brown, then there's no more rust there to eat, right? And it's just the metal. So that's an easy indicator. So you just go there and you work it with the wire brush. Then once it stops turning brown, you're pretty much done. You've gone as far down in you've eaten away all the rust that will continue to rust, and now you just have the pitting left over. So very, very easy to use material. Just make sure you don't leave it on your skin for that long, and don't leave it on the car if you have it in a shape like mine. Don't leave it on the car for that long if you have like seals and chrome and other kinds of stuff on it, because again, it's a highly reactive chemical. So only use it on there for a certain amount of time, and then hit it with a hose. You know, I have my hose over there. So then hit it with a hose to make it stop reacting, and then you can start again, right? You can start again and then work on it again, because the new material is not going to have as long to act on it. And then when you're done, you can wash it off again, and then go from there. So this is kind of what you should see, and it will look better after I clean a little bit of that film off. After I spend 15-20 minutes cleaning most of this film off and hitting it with some acetone to get ready to wipe it off and go from there. So in the next 15 minutes or so, I should be able to paint this guy before 6 o'clock, before it gets too dark, and then we can move on, and I'll do the rest of the stuff that I need on this car. Finish the Mustang probably first. I just didn't want it to get any worse on the roof. There's some rust here, but the moisture doesn't sit here as long as it does on the roof. and the paint is not flaking as hard as it was on the roof. So the rust on the roof was definitely further than here, but I do have some other spots that eventually I'll have to go around and do the rust killing on the car. And this is how you would do it. You would just dissolve it away. This is the professional way of doing it. There's no coating or anything like that on the top that could flake off or anything like that. It's just you kill the rust, you make sure that it's all gone, and then you coat over top of it with something that'll seal it, a 2-part, so that it won't react with sun, or that's not permeable, and it won't react. So another thing that I recommend with Rabbit specifically is you could just do that rust killer on top or coat right on top, but what you'll find is when I was grinding on it is that these spots were actually under the paint and hadn't shown yet. So there are spots that you may not see that are under the paint that just haven't popped up yet. So my suggestion is that if you have rust like this, just remove everything and then just make sure that you eat it away, because there might be rust underneath the surface that hasn't caused enough damage for the paint to curl yet, and you might find it once you grind it. So I suggest that you grind it. If you see rust like this, grind the whole thing, you'll find it. It's just an issue with the stock paint, which the Rabbits had. So